One of the very difficult bridges to cross when it comes to playing jazz guitar and being more fluent, especially with improvising, is moving beyond, say, fretboard knowledge of, say, where your arpeggios and scales lie, to being able to improvise and say things and create phrases with them. And for me, it's going beyond basic fretboard knowledge of things like, say, this is a C and a G, to the point where you recognize that that's a perfect fifth, and you know what it's going to sound like before you play it. Now, I've not really covered intervals in a kind of overarching way in a video on my channel, so today's video is just going to do that for you. I'm going to break down everything you need to know about finding and locating intervals on the guitar, so stay tuned. Now, three basic things that you want to grasp first is one, that an interval is basically a way of describing the distance between two notes. Secondly, intervals are things that you can become familiar with. Each interval has a particular sound quality that you can learn to recognize when you hear it in a recording and learn to find on your instrument. That helps with so much when it comes to studying and playing jazz guitar. Thirdly, there's two types of intervals in that you can play either what's called a melodic interval. Say if I take this C and E, which is a major third, and I play them one after another, that would be a melodic interval. Whereas if I played them at the same time, that would be a harmonic interval. Now, there's a few things I'd like to address that commonly cause confusion when learning intervals, and just to bring them to your attention so that they don't cause you any difficulty. The first thing is the nature of the guitar makes learning intervals maybe more different than, say, on the piano. It's not as straightforward. First off, the tuning of the guitar makes finding intervals between the G and the B string different to everywhere else. When we talk about the open strings, the interval between E and A is a fourth. The interval between A and D is a fourth. D to G is a fourth. But G to B is a major third, and back to fourth for B and E. And what this means is the way you find intervals crossing strings. Say if I do this major third here, C and E, crossing from the E string to the A string, you'll notice the pattern there. There's our root on the E string, the third is 1 fret lower on the string below. If I did that on the A to the D string, same shape. D to G string, same shape, but G to B, they're going to be on the same fret. And the interval will be 1 fret higher from where it is normally. And then B to E, back to our original shape. So that's one thing just to give you a heads up that commonly causes confusion, so you're aware of that. The other thing is that on the guitar, unlike the piano, you can find exactly the same note. I mean exactly the same pitch and musical notation in more than one place. So say take this note C, you can also get it here. Yes, I suppose the gauge of string, the fact this G string's thicker than the B string, but this is exactly the same pitch. And so that means, that causes confusion because it means you can get your intervals in different ways for that particular C. The upshot of that when it comes to learning intervals is that essentially you have two ways of looking at playing an interval from a particular note. You can play horizontally up one string, say if I wanted to find a third from this C, could find it up there at fret 9, there's E, or I could go vertically, so more like playing in position and find it on the B string, just there. So that can often cause confusion. And so just be aware of that. We've got the horizontal versus vertical way to find the note. Either find the note on the same string or find it on another string. And then the third thing that I think causes confusion is the lots of different ways of referring to intervals by different people. So take the interval of a minor third. That might be referred to as simply a minor third. It might be referred to as a flat 3. It might be referred to as min3, so min third in shorthand, or m3 with lowercase m. And all those kind of things, if you're not used to them, you can be like, what does that mean? Oh, okay. And some people will obviously use flat 3, some people say full minor third. And so I'm going to break down that today so that you're aware of the different ways people refer to them, because that's important too. Next, we want to think about interval quality. And this is how we break down intervals into different categories. And they work as follows. So we've got major, and that's indicated with a capital M. Minor, indicated with a lowercase m. Perfect, with a P. And then augmented with an A and diminished with a D. Now you're obviously familiar with major and minor, I'm sure augmented and diminished too. But the perfect bit, often people are like, well, what does perfect mean? Why are they called that? I understand we've got minor chords, major chords, augmented chords, diminished chords, but what's the perfect bit? That is often spoken about as the reason we use that term perfect is that those intervals are the most consonant. So there's the least dissonance in those particular intervals. In terms of learning intervals, we are going to find them from a root note. In this video, we're obviously going to use C because that makes the most sense to start with. And what you want to work towards is being able to find any interval from that root note anywhere on the guitar. So if I find all the C's on the guitar, I then want to be able to locate my seconds and thirds and fourths from that particular note. Now we're just going to concern ourselves today with what's called simple intervals. That's intervals within the octave, so from one C to another. There are intervals above that, which we call compound intervals, and that's things like, you know, above the octave, so above 8 if you like, so ninths, 11ths and 13ths and so on. We're going to keep out the deep end for now. Now in a second I'll put on the screen my interval table that you can get on Patreon, and this is going to break down the intervals up to the octave, so simple intervals, and it also breaks down the different ways that people like to refer to them. Between C and the next version of C, so an octave above that, there's 12 notes. So say if I take the B string, C, 1 fret up, C sharp, then D, D sharp, E. You know, if I kept going, I'm going to play 12 notes until I get back to C. This table references all of those intervals in relation to C. So C to C sharp, C to D, C to D sharp or E flat, C to E, C to F, C to F sharp, and so on. So the table on the screen here, the left-hand column is how many semitones, which is on the guitar, frets as well, away from the root. So think of 0 as C. And then in the second column, we've got the interval name. So you see there different terminology there. So we've got unison, minor second, major second, and so on. Second column, the shorthand name that people often like to use, like P1, M2, which is lowercase m for minor, remember. M, the following M2 with an uppercase means major second. And then sometimes people use symbols for these. I say symbols, just another shorthand way would be instead of M2, flat 2. So that shows you the two different ways that people refer to those intervals. And then I've actually written in the final table the example of the note that would give you. And the first interval we've got is just playing the same note. So that would be the same C played one after another. So that would be unison. That's a perfect interval, or referred to as, you see, P1. Doesn't really have a symbol for it. So that would be C and the same C. And then the second interval, a minor second, would be going from C to D flat. So shorthand M2 or a flat 2. Then the next interval, a major second, that's C to D. And that would be M2 with capital M, or just say second. Then we've got the minor third. So that's C to E flat or D sharp. Now, that interval will be referred to as an M3 with lowercase and then flat 3. Then we've got the major third, uppercase M and 3, or just plain 3. Perfect fourth, P4, or just fourth. Then we get an interesting one here. We could call this next interval, which would be C to G flat or F sharp. This could either be referred to as an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth. And one thing to know about augmented intervals is that an augmented interval is raising. So if you think of an augmented fourth, if you look, we've got a perfect fourth before the augmented fourth. So think of a augmented fourth as raising the fourth by a semitone. And then the diminished fifth would be, with diminished intervals, we lower by a semitone. So if you look after the diminished fifth, we've got perfect fifth. So it's one lower. Augmented fourth, diminished fifth could be labelled as A4, D5, or probably more commonly in jazz, you know, the symbol way, sharp 4, flat 5. Next we get the perfect fifth, C to G, P5, just fifth. Then the minor 6, C to A flat or G sharp, so it's lowercase m and 6 and the flat 6. Then major 6, uppercase M and 6 and then 6th. Minor 7th, C to B flat or A sharp, and that would be M lowercase m7 or the flat 7, and then major 7, uppercase M, that's C to B, and then octave, P8, that's a perfect interval. Now I've added some colour to that table to help you see the similar intervals by quality, so, or category I should say. So White being the perfect intervals, so unison, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, and octave. The minor intervals being in that horrible pinkish colour. I wouldn't paint a room with that colour. Minor second, minor third, minor six, minor seven. And this helps you see a little pattern that develops where the minor interval becomes before the major equivalent. Like you got minor second, then you got the major second in yellow. Minor third, then in yellow you've got the major third. Same with minor six, then major six, minor seven, then major seven. In terms of finding this on the guitar, I think simplest thing to do is locate it on one string first. So if we go to the B string, we've got C here at fret 1, and we've got C at fret 13. So that's our octave of that note. So first off, if we just play the same note, there's that unison interval. C to D flat, our flat 2, minor second. C to D, that would be our major second. C to E flat, that would be our minor third. C to E, our major third. C to F, perfect fourth. C to G flat, that could either be described as the augmented fourth or the diminished fifth. They've, on my software, it has it as a flat 5, yeah, so that's the flat 5. C to G, perfect fifth. C to A flat, that's our minor 6. C to A, and that's our major 6. C to B flat, that's our minor 7th. C to B, that's our major 7th, and then we've got the octave, C to C. Now one thing you could try doing with that is just play those intervals and sing them to the point where you could play the C and maybe try and sing the interval you're about to play before you play it. And some additional practice tips at this point. That table, that diagram, just long lists, and it's information. It needs to become meaningful to you, it needs to become musical for you. Intervals, as I said earlier, have character and quality to them. So you need to learn what that means to you. And it is a little bit subjective, but what does a major second remind you of? Does it remind you of a song? Does it have a particular character? Some intervals you might describe as, tense, like a minor second. There's a reason that was used in Jaws, because it is tense, especially if you play them at the same time, which is not the easiest thing to do. Also, make sure you can sing them, or as you practice them, sing them. Like say if I did C to D, major second, sing it as you play it. Dun, dun, then, or try this, play it, then sing it. Da, da, or reimagine it in your head. That's a very important step to take, so it's not just playing it, you're really internalizing the sound of it. And then finding some more meaning within that. You could find the intervals of the major scale, major second, third, fourth, perfect fifth, 6, major 6, major 7, octave. Finding that on the guitar, being able to sing it so you know the sound of it. Now, one typical method that people like to use when practicing and studying intervals is having a song which is a reference point for a particular interval. Say C to D again, that's a good reference point for that would be Happy Birthday. That obviously I play a C twice, so that's a unison interval, but then I have the interval of a major second, so Happy Birthday is my reference point for the sound of a major second. Now over on Patreon I put together a table of my interval references which references both popular music and jazz standards as much as possible. Say for example the first interval of Take the A Train is a C to an A, so that's a major 6, so that song's a great reference point for that. And if you know that song, da, da, that first interval, da, da, that can be a reference point for a major 6 if you're struggling with it. But having songs to reference and to record is just a way for you to attach some meaning to these intervals rather than just being, say, numbers. So that was the simple intervals horizontally, and I really like that approach first because it lays out the guitar in a linear fashion, much like the piano, much simpler. As soon as we introduce string crossing, which we're going to now, things become more complicated, and you'll see why. So playing vertically in position, let's start from this C here on the E string at fret 8 and find all the simple intervals between there and the next C. So we start out with our unison interval, just play the C again, same note. We can get our minor second, our flat 2, 1 fret higher, fret 9, so that's the flat 2 minor second. Major second, 2 frets higher, so that's our second. Then the minor third, probably from here, 2 places you want to be aware of. On the same string at fret 11, that's our flat 3 minor third, or on the A string at fret 6. The major third, we could get it on the same string, but that would be getting out of kind of almost playing in a position. So let's find it on the A string at fret 7, so our major third. Perfect fourth, fret 8 on the A string. The flat 5, augmented fourth, diminished fifth, fret 9 on the A string. The perfect fifth, fret 10 on the A string. For the minor 6, we could go to the A string again, fret 11. That's getting a bit out of our reach. Or we could get it at fret 6 on the D string. James Bond feel to that one. And then the major 6, fret 7, the 6 on the D string. The minor 7th, or the flat 7, fret 8 on the B string. Major 7, and that's fret 9 on the D string. And then the octave, fret 10. So that's sort of finding it in from one root, going across strings to find most of the notes. As I said on the beginning of the video, on Patreon, on the second tier, that's the accompanist tier, there's some additional materials related to this video to help you take this further. I cover what I just did there from the A string, D string, G string, B string, and the high E, so I break it down, you know, from different C's on the guitar to help you with that. There's also the tables that were on the screen in today's lesson, as well as my interval references, so the songs that I use to learn them, and I break that down and play them for you so that you can find ways to remember these intervals. But if you've got any questions, any comments based on today's lesson, do leave them below. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday. Until next time, you take care.